Donald Trump has won the 2024 US presidential election. What does this mean for Africa in regards to military cooperation, aid, diplomatic relationship, and economy? During Trump's first term, the Trump's administration's foreign policy in Africa was characterized by a mix of security, economic, and diplomatic initiatives with a focus on counterterrorism, trade, and countering Chinese influence. And as we all know, during the Trump's administration, he didn't focus on Africa that much, to the point where he was getting criticized. People believed that he was neglecting Africa and focusing elsewhere, which, to be honest, Africans didn't mind, because when there's a lot of focus in African countries, we have seen a negative impact and not actually seen a positive impact. We'll talk about that a little bit more in this video. So some of the key aspects of Trump's foreign policy in Africa during his first term was: 1. Counterterrorism and security cooperation. During Trump's administration, he called for a reduction of US troops that are being sent to Africa, which Africans actually celebrated. People believe, especially people in the West, believe that Africans are celebrating when foreign troops are being sent to Africa. In this case, the foreign troops are the US troops that are on African land. A lot of people are not happy with that decision, because a lot comes with having foreign troops on your land. They have immunity, so whenever they commit a crime, they can get away with it. People are not happy about that. Also, these same troops that are there to help the people, they are accused of committing some heinous crimes, and people on the continent of Africa are just done with that. They don't want that to be there, although the governments love it, because they're puppets. They are benefiting from it. They have this relationship with these leaders, world leaders, and Western countries, so they're happy to facilitate that for them. But the people, the locals that are living around those troops, they complain a lot. Like, for example, let's talk about the British Army in Kenya. How many stories are coming out what the troops are doing in the country? And unfortunately, they'll get away with it because they have immunity.
Well, the Defense and Foreign Relations Committee has launched an inquiry into activities by the British Army Training Unit in Kenya, Batuk. Committee Chair Nelson Koech approved a proposal to probe the activities of Batuk. This follows an investigative report by NTV titled Camouflage Crimes, which revealed how activities by a number of soldiers from Batuk have damaged the lives of residents, including unexploded bombs which have maimed some residents and killed others. The unsolved murders of the 20-year-old Agnes Wanjiru is also among the issues which the committee will be looking into.
And when it comes to trade, during his first term, Trump focused on increasing a two-way trade and investment between the US and African nations. The initiative sought to boost economic ties, support infrastructure development, and expand US business interests on the continent. And mostly he was focused on that instead of aid. Aid is something that he discouraged, and he was reducing the amount of aid that was being sent to African countries. Of course, temporarily, because of dependence on that aid, a lot of countries felt that pinch, but at the end of the day, African countries need to start being independent. You should not always wait for aid to pay your staff to feed your people. You need to come up with ways to pay your people a sustainable way of doing things. Use those resources that God gave you, your natural resources, to get money instead of depending on aid coming from Western world. And there's something attached to the aid. They ask you to do certain things that you're not even happy with because you're taking their money. So I don't believe cutting aid is such a horrible thing, because at the end of the day, a lot of that aid doesn't even go to the people. It goes to a few of the politicians' pockets. So what are we doing here? It's better if the people understand that relying on aid is not a good thing, and we start working towards being independent. So Trump focusing on investment and trade instead of aid is not so bad, although some believe that aid is just the most wonderful thing these Western countries can do for us. It has brought us where we are at right now. We're literally crippled. We can't move without an aid coming from one country or another. We should cut that umbilical cord. If we're going to be forced to it, so be it. Another thing that we've seen during Donald Trump's first term is that he really didn't focus much on African countries' human rights violation. This is what we hear quite a lot. Like whenever something happens, you'll hear a Western country, not just the US, but it could be a European country or the UK, come out and make a statement, almost threaten to take these countries to the UN Security Council, or at the very least make a statement and say that this is not right, this shouldn't happen, we will stop giving you this aid, we will stop this funding. We hear this quite often. But during Trump's administration, although he did do that to a number of countries, including Ethiopia, he didn't seem to care that much. He didn't meddle in other countries, in this case, African countries, what they're up to, what they're doing. It was never like the way it was during the Biden administration. The Trump's administration has been criticized because of not focusing on promoting human rights or governance reforms in Africa. So he was criticized for not being involved in that. But when you look at it from the African country's perspective, it's different. Although in the world, in the mainstream media, they make it sound like America is just, the perfect country to preach democracy to the rest of the world and to show us how it's done. It comes off as dictatorship. It comes off as, I am the big brother, I am your elder, you do what I want. It's forceful. It doesn't translate well when they are threatening or they are involving themselves, these governments, into African countries' issues and labeling it human rights violations, when sometimes it's not even that, because we have reported on this channel so many times the stories that are being posted or shared on social media are not always the truth. It can be seen as a positive because he will be focusing on his own internal issues and affairs, leaving the rest of the world to deal with their own issues by themselves. So people are actually celebrating this fact because of how the Biden administration was forcing a lot of African countries' government to bow down, to do what he and his administration wants them to do, to the point where they were banning judges and lawmakers because they were against the cultures and values the Biden administration held. So that's another point. The other one is diplomatic relationship. If you remember, during Trump's first term, he called African countries shithole countries. That didn't sit well with many people, and they turned their backs against him, and leaders were not very open to having a relationship with him. But then they softened up, or they had their own agenda, so they warmed up to him, and the relationship was slowly growing. But at the end of the day, Trump, you can clearly tell that he's not really bothered, he's not really working that hard to have a relationship with African countries, which some people might say is a bad thing, but in my personal opinion, it's a good thing, because at the end of the day, when these foreign countries are meddling less in our continent, I think that is when we'll start to build ourselves and we can get to where we want to get to, because there's so much meddling and intervention and interference, and that's just, we're done with that. So Trump not caring to have a strong relationship with African countries might not be such a bad thing. But anyways, fam, let us know down below what your thoughts are about Trump winning this election and what it means globally, specifically when it comes to his foreign policy and relationship with African countries. I am Wongel Zelalem.